All right, we are live.
All right. We're live again to the fourth worst best podcast featuring Corner News and Fred Gutierrez from Gladys and Shield.
Thanks,
What's
Fred,
up,
for
brother?
not much. Just here with another podcast. Wanna welcome everyone on the stream. Tuck, hey, what's it going, man? Tuck, Good Citizen News, Trent, um, Saint Earth, Simon Lizero. Welcome to the stream. It's your first time here. We have been covering uh, kind of uh, kind of legal stuff. We're not attorneys. Well, I'm not an attorney. I just play one sometimes.
When you have to argue for yourself in court, and you are the private attorney general, in fact, when you have to defend the American citizenry in civil rights lawsuits against the improperly conduct and behaving government.
That is true. Whenever you have a civil rights case, you are considered a private attorney general. In fact, according
Private
to
attorney.
according to the case, I forgot
Fox.
the
It's
what was
Fox.
it?
Fox versus U.S.
Fox versus U.S. So there you go. Whenever they ask me, "You're an attorney?" Well, I'm a private attorney general. In fact,
Private assistant attorney general, in fact. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you're better than an attorney. Why? Because you won't lie, cheat, or steal.
that is true.
You won't
That
play
is
let's
true.
make a deal.
Yeah,
Let's just talk about justice.
that is true.
So,
So
a lot going on, which we'll talk
yeah,
about later. But tonight, we're going to talk about we said we'd talk about Pennsylvania v. Mimms, which is the civil rights or the Supreme Court ruling from 1977, in which Uh, Harry Mimms was pulled over for an expired license plate, and the officer found that he had a pistol on him, and so they went ahead and the officer pulled him out of the car, patted him down, saw the pistol, and decided that he would arrest him for carrying a concealed weapon, which in Pennsylvania is illegal. They don't have good Second Amendment protections there.
right.
So the reality is The reason we're talking about this, whoa, where did that light come from? I think I'm going to have to change my angle here. Am I too
That's a good
dark or am
angle.
I okay?
No, you're okay. Lighting is perfect.
Wow, if it was just up a little bit higher, but I could have moved the table maybe, and all would have been good. So let me see here. Let me sit here. So you guys see me okay? I hope you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me lock
The
this thing down.
lighting is good. Yeah.
Okay. Good
If it
enough.
gets
Good enough.
if it gets dark, the phone compensates for the darkness, so you're good.
Okay. Well, thanks for the tech advice. Okay. So one of the things the reason we want to talk about this more is because, uh, there's a question about whether or not when you get pulled over on a traffic stop and the officer asks you to get out of your car, if that is a lawful order. Now, what I want to do is, before we get too far there, I want to talk about what a lawful order is, because a lot of police officers, peace officers, are improperly trained, and they think just because they say something that it's a directive to somebody that it becomes a lawful order just because they hold official capacity and they say it, and that's exactly couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is that a lawful order has to have foundation in law, not based on their directive, opinion, or hunch or whatever. They have to have some lawful basis for instructing you to do anything. Otherwise, they're acting outside their official capacity, and you don't have to listen to them because it is not a lawful order. Additionally, cops, peace officers are not attorneys, and they cannot give you legal advice. And they like to think that they are, but the reality is they are not. And they'll tell you things. One of the things they like to do is, I'm going to have to go over this too, is ask you the question, are you an attorney? And one of the things that, I've had to say in the past is when they ask me that question is, how bad do you want to find out? Or I'll say, do you have to be an attorney to be competent in the law? Because that's really the issue. And then they don't know what to say. But I want to talk to you about the whole issue of questioning. And I touched on this before, but this is a very important issue of how you deal with public officials. The way to disarm and throw somebody off balance mentally is to ask them a question, because when we hear a question, we have the mental belief that we are obligated to answer that question. It goes back to when we were children. And if our parents asked us a question, it's like the truth ray. And we go, what was that question? Did you do this? And we're like, yes, I did. And so what peace officers are taught in their training is to ask questions, to talk over you, to direct you, to yell at you, and do things that will mentally and emotionally disarm you. And when they do that, you have to be aware of what's happening, because this is a tactic. And these people, these peace officers, they are trained in tactical maneuvering when they're dealing with private citizens. And most people, because they're uneducated, and we walk in these situations and these encounters with actually just legitimate innocence, they actually function in a very predatory fashion. And they think it's funny. They laugh about it. So that's why you have to learn to think in advance. When they ask you a question, ask them a question back. And that's why we have the 10 questions we ask public officials. They ask you a question about anything. The first question is, and we'll get these put out there, they're on the Gladys and Shield website. The first question we want to ask is, are you rightfully in my presence? Okay, if you look at the Terry paperwork we put out last week, that is the most important, the most important question we needed to ask any public official when we're talking to them, or somebody who alleges they're public official. Are you rightfully in my presence? Which means, number one, are you in your official capacity? And number two, does that capacity allow you to engage me in any conversation? So That's where we start. And it's the same thing with Mimms, and we'll cover all these steps, and you're going to see how everything just flows and falls together. The pattern is always the same, okay? And that's why we use the term procedure. The pattern and procedures are always the same. So when they ask you a question, the first question is, well, are you rightfully in my presence? Which means, are you in your official capacity? And your capacity, does it allow you to engage in a legitimate encounter with me that requires me to answer any of your questions? So, and without going over the questions, we'll do that later, but you'll see this as time goes by because we'll cover these things in future podcasts, how everything weaves and ties together and how you are the one as a private citizen living above the line of the Constitution, where public servants who function below the line have to support and defend your rights in their conduct. So now we get someone who comes up to you and says, okay, I have a lawful order for you here. So we'll go to Pennsylvania v. Mimms right now. Harry Mimms was driving down the road in Pennsylvania, and he gets pulled over because he has expired tags. So this particular officer, which it's funny in the case, they don't mention his name in the ruling, but this officer has a practice of stopping people and giving them, tell them to get out of the car regardless. He pulls you over and he says, you need to get out of the car. Why? Officer safety. And the Supreme Court in Mimms actually goes through and develops a presentation of legitimacy of officer safety, which I can agree with. And what they did is they relied on one particular study that said, and it's funny that that particular study was not the best one used, but they used it, and it was from 1963. So they used a 14-year-old study that said that at that time, up to 30% of officer homicides were done on traffic stops. Well, now, I don't know all the details about that. You know, we don't know when and where. Hold on a second. There we go. My drink. So, and we don't know anything about that study. They actually mention it and they give some of the details about it, but they don't show us exactly what are all the circumstances of the location, the time frame, all the things we need to determine whether or not something is valid in terms of being a study. But they use that, and the Supreme Court says, okay, that's fine. But let's take a look at this. So this particular officer has had this practice that's been going on for however many years, at least since Terry, because they reference Terry all the time. And at least the state attorney general did in the certiorari they applied for here with the state Supreme Court. So I'm just going to read this here. It says, against this important interest, we are asked to weigh the intrusion into the driver's personal liberty occasioned not only by the initial stop of the vehicle, which was admittedly justified, but by the order to get out of the car. We think this additional intrusion can only be described as de minimis. De minimis means really it's not that big of an intrusion. And it goes on to develop it further. The court says the driver is being asked to expose very little more of his person than is already exposed to the officer. The police have already lawfully decided that the driver shall be detained. The only question is whether he shall spend that period sitting in the driver's seat of his car, or, this is very important, standing alongside of it. Not going to the front of my car, not going to the back of your car, by standing alongside of your car. And this is in the ruling, or in the development of the argument. Not only is the insistence of the police on the latter choice not a serious intrusion upon the sanctity of the person, but it hardly rises to the level of a petty indignity. And a petty indignity is like having to put your hands against the wall, spread your legs, being patted down in a public scenario where other people can see you and you have to suffer that humiliation. And that's what it says in Terry versus Ohio, but it continues to say what is most a mere inconvenience cannot prevail when balanced against, here it comes, legitimate concerns for the officer's safety. Not an unknown concern, or an illegitimate concern, but a legitimate. Legitimate means legal, legally founded, factually founded. And so when it goes into the final holding in the Supreme Court ruling in Pennsylvania v. Mimms, it says the police officer's order for Mimms to get out of the car, issued after he was lawfully detained, was reasonable and thus permissible under the Fourth Amendment. The state's proffered justification for such an order, the officer's safety, is both legitimate and weighty, and the intrusion into respondent's personal liberty occasioned by the order being at most a mere inconvenience. So he gave him an order to get out of the car. Now, that order was based on the fact that, again, we don't have all the details here because we don't have all the lower court rulings, that I believe this officer knew who he was, that there may have been a bolo on him, which is a be on the lookout for, or that the police department was familiar with Harry Mimms as being somebody who was, let's just say, a repeat offender, because I think he was. Harry Mimms, I believe, was a repeat offender. So they knew he was, so they had reason to believe that he might be armed and dangerous. So that's a legitimate concern based on the reasonable inferences from the facts that the officer had at the time of the stop. And then when he told him to get out of the car, he saw a bulge in the waistband. He saw a bulge in his coat. Again, they never had body cams back in 1963 or 1970. They never had any of that. So we're just taking the officer's word for it. We know what that means. That's like normally a pile of horse shit. But he said that he knew this guy or saw this guy, but he had reasonable facts, and I would be inclined to agree that Mimms was armed and dangerous because of who he was and their experience with him. So, under the circumstances, knowing that, going back to Terry, that he was armed and dangerous, then it would be legitimate for the police officer to ask him to exit the vehicle so he could further examine to see if he was actually armed, because he had reason to believe that he probably was going to be dangerous, guessing that he'd been convicted of other violent crimes. So there's the facts that they don't put all in this order. But the key word that we use here is the legitimate concern for officer safety. So, for example, if the officer pulls over a mom that has 3 kids in the car and says that she has expired tags, and she has no known history, and remember this, they pull up the tags and they run everything there. So back then they just saw that it was probably expired, and that was good enough. But nowadays it's a little more involved, and they pull up everything on you. They find out who is exactly the person that is tied to that particular car. So now we have all that. So they pull this lady over. She's got 3 kids in the car. They say, oh, she's only had 1 traffic violation in the past. And that violation involved a not coming to a complete stop at a stop sign. So knowing this and knowing that there's nothing else there, when the officer comes in and does a plain sight inspection of the car as he comes up to it, he can assume that this person is not armed and not dangerous, unless he sees something in plain view that would cause him to be thinking otherwise. So is there a legitimate reason to ask this woman to exit the car? No. So would it be a lawful order if he asked her to exit the car? The answer is clearly no. Why? Because there's no legitimate concern for the officer's safety. So, and going to the next part, when you're asked to step out of the car, the second thing that was held in Pennsylvania v. Mimms was under the standard announced in Terry, whether the facts available to the officer at the moment of the seizure would cause him to believe that the action was necessary to cause him to be arrested and further searched. And the answer is, in Mimms, that again is the support of the first part of the ruling, which is the legitimate concern for officer safety. If there is no legitimate concern, then they cannot reasonably expect you to get out of the car. And I remember one time, I'm just going to tell you a story, so that should be clear, but we'll answer some questions if you need it. and I'll finish the last part about it. But this is pretty simple. I was pulled over one time driving a van. We were coming back from the what was it? The North American AAU powerlifting championships, and it was held in Nevada. And I was driving a van full of people, and this is the day I made the mistake of having a box of donuts on the dash, right? Krispy Kremes, and I think we were actually fishing for police without a license because we caught one. And he pulled over, and then he told me, he said, he told me to pull over in this parking lot. And I said, yeah, that's fine. It was a closed dirt lot, right? And I was like, I'm not comfortable here. It was dusk. And I had, about 8 people in the van with me. And the officer said, is this your van? I said, no, it's not. He said, do you have your license? And I said, no, but here's my information. And I said, you ran the plate. It's not mine. You said, you can't give me a citation for anything because I didn't have proof of insurance. And I think I did find the registration and handed it to him. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you a citation for no insurance. And I said, well, that's a violation of the law because you cannot issue a citation for me for no insurance when it's not my car. And he goes, what are you, some kind of constitutionalist? And I laughed at him. I said, no, you're more of a constitutionalist than I am. You're the one that swore an oath to support and defend it. I'm just telling you what right and wrong is. So he issued me a citation, and it was actually thrown out. And but after he issued the citation to me, he called another police officer because he didn't like me. And so now all of us in the car are wearing these shirts that say AAU North American Powerlifting Championships, right? So this guy, he's feeling a little frisky. He says, he handed me the citation. He said, I need you to sign this, or you have to go to jail, wait for a magistrate. And I said, when is your magistrate available? He goes, not until Monday. And I said, well, that's stupid, isn't it? Shouldn't you have a magistrate available to issue warrants 24/7? Why don't you get one of those fat ass magistrates to get off his dead lazy ass and be available in the court? Let's go talk to him about this citation so I can go home. And of course he wouldn't. And so he called a backup, and then this guy, another peace officer shows up, 2 more show up actually, with their lights on. And this guy comes up to me, he says, Mr. Gutierrez, would you step out of the car, please? And I said, for what? He said, just step out of the car and come sign the citation. I said, it's already signed. Here you go. And I said, at this point, this traffic stop is concluded. Give me my copy and have a cup and fuck off. So he's standing there. He said, well, we'd like you to come back to the back of the car. And I go, you give me a legitimate reason and I'll come back there. And he said, well, we'd like to talk to you. I said, well, good news. Traffic stop's ended. It's a consensual encounter, and I don't want to talk to you. So again, have a cup of shut the hell up, leave me alone, and I'm done. I'm heading out of here. So that was that. And they stood there and just looked at me. He couldn't order me out of the car, number one, after the stop, because there was no legitimate reason to continue the stop. Number two, he couldn't give me a lawful order because there were none to give, because there was no foundation of law for him to make the request. And even during the traffic stop, he couldn't ask me to step out of the car because he had no legitimate reason to ask me to, because he could not point to any articulable facts that demonstrated that I was, 1, armed in accordance with Terry, and number 2, dangerous. And there you go.
So what do you think as far as let's say they're gonna threaten me with arrest for not stepping out? Should
Okay.
should I comply or what?
What I would do is this, is because they, the standard now in most areas and of the country, the peace officers are required to carry and activate body cameras. So the way it works is, as soon as they, and I like this being automatic, as soon as they activate their emergency lights, the body cam kicks on. So it's not necessarily in their control. So once those are on, now you have them recording. And I'm going to address something here about that before I continue. So this is a commercial pause. Cops always say this, and you look at all these videos on YouTube and any encounters you had, you say, well, I'm recording too. And it really pisses me off. You know, they say that like it's like, oh, like that makes it legitimate. No, my recording is free, you fat turd. I have to pay for yours, and if it's not redacted and edited, I'll be lucky. So I'm going to trust me over you because you still are probably a turd. And you can look for any reason to lie and cover your ass when you do things that are wrong. So moving back to what I was saying before that, is that when they ask you to get out of the car, and if they ever bring up Pennsylvania v. Mimms, just whether they do or don't, just say, well, according to Pennsylvania v. Mimms, which ties into Terry, do you believe that I am armed and dangerous? Because unless you have that legitimate concern, which you must factually articulate, that you see a gun or you see evidence of maybe contraband or something else that would indicate that there's the propensity for danger or violence on my behalf, then I'm not getting out of the car. I am perfectly safe right here. If you don't get out, then we're going to drag you out. And I'd say, I'm not getting out because you better get a sergeant over here or somebody who's not as stupid as you are, and let's make sure we address this legally. Secondarily, what you can do if it's during the daytime, tell them to call the city or county attorney and give them the facts. Just say, this guy's trying to order me out of my car when in violation of Pennsylvania v. Mimms, that I am not, he cannot point to the legitimate facts that demonstrate that I am armed and dangerous. And I am personally concerned for my safety if I step out of my car because I believe this guy or this woman is emotionally unstable at the moment, if not permanently, and I am in danger of serious physical harm or death if I step out of the car in this person's presence. So I would like to remain in my car. And at that point, you put your hands on the steering wheel, activate your phone, keep recording, and get somebody there who actually has lawful authority. So that's the thing. And see, now, I put this little sheet together and we've kind of highlighted the things. And the most important, word in this whole context is the word legitimate. It has to be balanced against legitimate concerns for the officer's safety. And I'm trying to think where that's at. Is that on page 1 or page 2? Yeah, you can go to page 2. It's there. It's also on page 1. And that's where they directly reference Terry versus Ohio, 392 U.S., page 17. What is a most severe inconvenience cannot prevail when balanced against a legitimate concern for the officer's safety. And I'm going to tell you this, I have to agree with that. I don't believe anybody should be put unnecessarily at risk, really for any reason, unless they're in the act of committing a crime. So if you look at this here, so you go to bottom of page 2 there. Yeah, the first highlighted section under 1 and 2. This is under the order. And the whole order was this, is that with Harry v. Mimms and versus Pennsylvania, was he had this revolver and he got pulled over for whatever facts they had beyond what they're stating here. They had reason to believe that Mimms was armed and dangerous and he should be removed from the car. And when the bulge became in his coat pocket or in his waistband became more evident, they immediately frisked him because they believe crime was afoot. There's already lawful detainment, but there's something further. And so they found the weapons and arrested him for carrying a concealed weapon. And this was used to convict him. Where the state Supreme Court said, no, it's okay. They violated the Fourth Amendment because they didn't have any reasonable belief that this guy was armed and dangerous. But there was obviously something more. And this is another one of those cases where in the actual development of the case, in the ruling, they didn't put all the facts that they should have put there. So that's basically the long and short of it. So remember to ask them questions. They work for you, and they have to make sure they're rightfully in your presence. So, but under the circumstances of Mimms, and I've seen so many videos. They say Pennsylvania. There's too many V's in there. Pennsylvania v. Mimms. I have the right to ask you to get out of the car. No, you don't have the right. Either you have limited delegated authority balanced by law to make the request or make the lawful order. And if it's a request, I decline. If it's an order, then please demonstrate the reasonable, articulable facts that present to you a reasonable officer that legitimately demonstrate that you have cause to be concerned for your safety with me. And if you
I've
don't
heard,
have that, go ahead.
yeah, I've heard so many officers saying because I say so.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
there you go. I say so too. Have
yeah.
that. That's what
So
I do is
so
say so.
so whenever I personally have encountered or have been ordered to step out, I always ask those two questions. Do you believe I am armed and dangerous? Because remember, in Texas, it is not unlawful to carry a firearm. So
Correct.
the simple act of carrying a firearm is not illegal,
Sufficient. Right.
right?
It's not illegal and it's insufficient on its face to require someone to step out.
Right.
Now, they can ask, well, I'm going to be cautious there. I don't want to say anything out there that would give anybody license to open the wrong door and say, I heard him say. No. The reality is that, they again, it has to be with Terry, or if you're in your car, they have to have the foundations of Terry. They have to have the lawful detainment. But then for you to step out of the car or to agree to a frisk of any kind, they have to demonstrate that 3 and 4 exist, which is under the demonstrations we presented in Terry, that you are armed and dangerous. Absent that, that would be more than a de minimis intrusion upon your Fourth Amendment right. It
And
would be a clear violation.
like you said, it has to be a legitimate concern for safety. Uh,
Yes, exactly.
One time I was pulled over by Texas Department of Public Safety, and I had a rifle strapped on with my with my well, I had it strapped and I was driving and I had it pointed downwards. And he pulled me over. I had my hands on the steering wheel, and he pulled me over for allegedly having dark tint. And and then he asked, "Can you just keep your hands on the steering wheel?" And he saw the rifle, but he was not concerned for his safety because he didn't order for me to step
You to get
out
out of the
or
car.
right. So he just said, "Can you keep your hands on the steering wheel?" And he wanted to check the tint, and I said no. So that was it. He left. So I mean, just an example of
Well
how
handled.
right. So it's just an example how you can handle a traffic stop. I mean, don't be acting uh, recklessly or don't be handling any firearm because they'll shoot
They
you
may
in
shoot
in
you.
a heartbeat. Yeah.
Yeah, they're, and again, a lot of these peace officers are improperly trained at best, and if not inexperienced in it, to the worst, they're cowards. And if, they get alarmed, they shoot people. And what they don't tell you is that, I think it was like sometime in the last couple of years, we look at these statistics. Approximately 220 peace officers around the country were killed, and but they don't put how many um, encounters that involved. That's tens of thousands of encounters. Only 200 peace officers lost their life, and they act like that's such a terrible thing, but they don't talk about the 2 to 5,000 citizens that lost their life, and over half of them it's unjustified, and they either hide it or they prevent it from being properly evaluated. And the people, unfortunately, are not in a position to afford lawful counsel, legal counsel, and so they don't know what to do, and they just let these things go away.
And
So,
they just mentioned uh, the death of law enforcement, or as they call it, line of duty death. And I took a training because I don't know if anybody knew here that I used to be a volunteer firefighter. I'm sorry,
okay,
and I had to take a course that every anybody that drives emergency vehicles has to take. And they were mentioning that the majority of the line of duty deaths are because of traffic accidents. So there you go. It's not that they get
firearms.
shot or firearms or anything like that. It's traffic accidents.
Yeah, and we know how they drive. So anyway, I want to say this before we get going too far because I don't want to piss off all the peace officer community because they probably throwing tantrums, screaming and shaving their head and looking like skinheads, and think that makes them look tougher. Or they grow beards and they want to look like they're homeless. They think that makes them look tougher. The reality is, I don't have a problem with anybody who's a public official operating within the boundaries of the limited delegation of law that we grant to them. Now, there's a key phrase there. We grant to them. They do not have full authority to do anything. And so as long as they do their job as relegated by the law, I don't have a problem with them because we hired them. We created the law that allows them to do certain things to make sure that our private interests are protected. And that's called the good of the public. I'm okay with that. But when they step outside that, and one of the things we went over in Terry, let's see if I can pull that up real quick because I think this is important. Is the power image they try to maintain? They're the only ones that try to pretend that they have a power image over the people, and they don't. That's why they're in every single state in the union. They are classified by law as peace officers, not Leos. Okay, which we talked about that a little before. That implies the absence of judge and jury and the right to appeal, no due process. They have a duty to, remember this, peace officers are actually accusers. That's the limits of what they can do. They can only accuse, and then due process takes over to find out whether there's any mitigation to what they are wanting to charge you with or claim that you did that is in violation of the public interest. Or two, whether or not, I forget what the other thing I was going to say was, but that's basically it. They don't have any other things to do. So we just want them to do their job, and I'm happy with it. If they see a motorist broken down, don't drive by them. Stop and help them out. Because that creates a hazard on the road. Do your job. Public safety. So, and the people need to remember this is that they're the ones that are above the public servants. The public servants serve them. We do not serve them. It is not our job to make them happy. It is not our job to make them like us. It is not our job to treat them in any particular way, nice, good, bad, ugly. If we're having a bad day, sometimes people get impatient and rude. That doesn't give them lawful authority to mistreat them because they're supposed to be neutral. Their training is supposed to help them recognize that sometimes people are indignant in their buttholes. And it's, be patient, be kind. Not everything has to be escalated. Not everything has to be brought to a point where there needs to be a battle. And
Right.
so get rid of this power image of, you thinking you're the beat officer. Hey, what you doing there, Bob? What you doing? How about none your business? If I'm not doing anything that demonstrates something that you come up and talk to me about in relation to Terry, I don't want to talk to you. So this goes on to other things too, is when you have an encounter with a peace officer, you get the right, you have the right to decide. Now remember, there's a difference between a right and then limited delegated authority, which we grant to our public servants. We have the right to talk to them or not talk to them. If they approach you and say, "Hey, how you doing? What are you doing?" Just like, "Is this a consensual encounter?" Bye. I don't want to talk to you. or you can stay right there because you have no obligation to walk away just because they approach you. So
Yeah, I think it's not smart to even engage in a consensual encounter because remember they can develop some sort of reasonable suspicion if you say something.
yeah,
Uh,
well, that's what they do. They ask questions. They're taught to ask questions. You watch all, I knew this years ago from when I was a clinical psychologist. When you study different professions and what they do and how they become effective at it, and cops don't often make statements, but when they do, they're usually wrong. Okay, especially when they're emotionally elevated, as most people do, But when they start yelling at you or saying things, uh, they're usually not right. They can stop and talk to you for investigative purposes only if they meet the standards of Terry. Do they have reasonable articulable suspicion by certain articulable facts that demonstrate crime is afoot? And if they don't have that, then, and by the way, this has been circulating through the internet and it's really pissing off these power image people that are peace officers. It's really grinding their gears because they want people to be afraid of them. They want people to bow down to them. It's a very sick mentality that they are trained with. Rather than realizing that they're a member of the community, they're serving as a public official for the community in favor and in the benefit of the community and not their club. And when they get trained properly, which, may happen someday, they're going to realize that they can conduct themselves better and stop trying to just coming after people for contempt of cop. So don't talk to them. You have no reason to talk to them. Whatever you're doing, they say, well, if you don't move along, I'm going to charge you with vagrancy. I mean, they have a whole bag of tricks. Disorderly conduct, good luck. They'll lose that 99.9% times out of 100. Never accept a plea deal on that. Number two, they can say, oh, if you don't move along, I'm going to charge you with vagrancy. Good luck with that because vagrancy, again, has a specific legal definition. And it is described in the statute what conduct constitutes vagrancy. And same thing for loitering. And it's not, you have the right to be in public places and stand and look around for as long as you want. Why? Because it is your property. We give ourselves permission to do this. So I said, hey, I give myself permission. It's like when I was 18, and I was in high school still. I moved out from home and I was still going to high school for another month and a half, 2 months. When I didn't want to show up for school, I wrote myself a note. Fred gives himself permission to miss school on this day. Signed, Fred Gutierrez. And there's nothing they could do because I was an adult in charge of myself. So, the same thing here is, give yourself permission to not talk to them. You owe them nothing other than when they do their job properly, modest appreciation, but that's even should be very guarded and limited because they're the ones who agreed to work for us. And they don't like to be reminded of that. You say, man, who are you working for? And again, I'm going to tell you, I have so many stories about this stuff, how uneducated these people are and how improperly trained they are. And I got stopped one time and I was talking to this peace officer was saying, you don't even know. I told him, I said, you don't even know who you work for. Yeah, I do. I work for the police department. I said, no, you don't, stupid. Where's the money come from that pays the peace officers? I'm a police officer. I said, read your contract and your oath. It says you are a peace officer. Read your license. You're a peace officer. You're supposed to make sure you prevent breaches of the peace. You don't create them. And I said, you actually work for the people. I said, the people are the one who pay the taxes that pay your salary. That's who you work for. And again, if the training was coming forward much better and more efficiently, unlike, and some people may have seen this, the training that's been instituted by these turds in New Jersey that were absolutely Nazi white supremacist criminals, they have since been shut down by the state attorney general in New Jersey for improperly and unconstitutionally providing training or types of training to peace officers. Tens of thousands of them around the country. They had to retrain them all in New Jersey. because they were improperly trained by this group and organization. And these guys, they're insane. They think that they have full authority to do whatever they want. So, but they don't. So what?
Yeah, like the like chapter, what was it, Texas chapter 552 that says and I always attach this to my open records request.
Oh,
It says under 552.001 government code, it says under the fundamental philosophy of the American constitutional form of representative government that adheres to the principle that government is the servant and not the master of the people. Yeah,
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 that's great.
they hate it. Yeah,
Hit the nail on the head there. The government is the servant of and not the master of the people.
yeah,
And they hate that. I'm telling you what, they just absolutely hate it. Because they think if they get employment with the government, that grants them the kind of
authority.
authority that we left 260 years ago. Well, coming up on 250 with the advent of the Declaration of Independence, which we're celebrating 250 years of that separation from England next year. So there's going to be a lot of remembrances that are going to be presented over the next, starting in January and going through most of next year, of how and why we became a free people. Not choosing a new master. We didn't trade King George for our government. We traded King George for our own sovereignty as a people. We got rid of him so we could be Lord and Master of ourselves. We are sovereign without subjects, which means we are independently and individually sovereign, but we don't have any subjects like a king. We have the full right of governance. And a government being necessary to the welfare and protection of the people, we institute the Constitution, which creates our government. So that's why we have that. So yeah, that's very good. Yeah, they are not the master; they are the servant of the people. And they look
Right.
at that like, we need to get T-shirts that say that.
Yeah, I
And
think
like
we
I
need
said,
to.
I have no objection to my public servants serving me, but their
Exactly.
job descriptions have been legislated and written in policy and procedures manuals about how we permit them to conduct themselves.
Right.
And the problem has been is that we have these DEI judges and these communist and fascist judges in there that provide too many protections for government employees when they absolutely violate the law. And there's a case, and this is a little older now, where a peace officer had over 200 sexual assault charges against him for sexually assaulting numerous women over the course of 3 years. Nasty, nasty things this guy did. Guess what they did? They took a plea deal. He took a plea deal, and the judge gave him 18 months. Let's see here, 18 months in jail, 12 months suspended, 6 months for time served, and put him on probation for 3 years. And he had to pay a $10,000 fine.
That's not bad.
If you did this, or my neighbor did this, or if I did that, I'd be looking at about 30 years in prison, if not life. Because if they get 10 of those things consecutively, woof. You're not going to serve these sentences concurrently, but consecutively, 5 years, 10 years each, you're going to be there until you're dust.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk more. We can talk about why peace officers are so protected another time. But I'll just give you a hint why they protect them, because they're treated as private security for government employees. That's their number one thing. They are private security. But number two, and we'll go into more detail about this later, is they are the revenue center for the county and city governments, the municipalities.
Yeah.
They issue citations, get arrests, and all these things like that. They make sure the courts have business, so the judges or the clerks, the transcriptionists, the judges, the bailiffs, the jails, the jailers, the public defenders, the prosecutors. All these people have employment because of the peace officer.
Yeah.
And so that's why they protect him, which I would say this in almost every situation in which a peace officer is involved. If a judge was elected on the foundation of being supported by a police organization, specifically the union, that they should not be allowed to hear any case that involves a peace officer because they have a conflict of interest. So anyway, food for thought. How long have we been on so far? We've got to be at least 50 minutes.
Cool. Yeah, about 50 minutes.
All right. Well, anyway, I hope, I think we did good. I think we clarified things about Pennsylvania v. Mimms. Why don't you give us a summary, Ismail? Summarize
Well,
Pennsylvania v. Mimms.
Pennsylvania v. Mimms, basically, there's several points. The first point would be the legitimacy of the detainment or the traffic stop in this case.
Correct.
That would be the very first point. If it's not a legitimate traffic stop, there you go. You don't have a right to order anyone out the vehicle.
Right.
So let's say they drag you out and they charge you because you didn't want to comply
Get
or
out.
whatever. Now you're protected under Pennsylvania versus Mimms. So it's
You're
gonna
right.
work. It's gonna work in your favor instead of their favor.
Against you. Yeah, correct. And that's a clear Fourth Amendment violation. Clear Fourth Amendment violation.
Right.
And remember this is if they physically force you out of your vehicle, they don't plan on being nice to you.
Right.
These people are generally frustrated and angry people. And they look for a reason to become violent. And I want to tell you, this is a mental disorder. It's kind of like, trannies. And, and I'm going to say this, if you want to be a tranny, go ahead and be a tranny. But the reality is I don't endorse and support it. And I think it demonstrates that there is a mental and emotional disorder associated with wanting to be a transsexual. There's something more there. And, it doesn't give you the right to do certain things.
Yeah.
So don't be angry. Don't be mentally warped. And so just because you're a peace officer, remember this, they're there to prevent breaches of the peace, not to look for reasons and participate by your conduct to create situations that cause basically predatory violence against innocent citizens. And there's more things we can talk about like that when people are being attacked by the police. They get charged with resisting arrest or striking an officer when they're in defensive posture because your body goes into survival mode and you're trying to keep from getting yourself killed. So that's for another day.
Yeah.
Another day.
Yeah. Yeah. We can
So,
we can maybe cover the resisting arrest charges for next time, which they use all the time.
yeah.
The interference and resisting arrest charges. At least here in Texas. Well, I know I have been charged with resisting arrest and interference a whole bunch of times.
And how'd those turn out?
In my favor because I never was.
Exactly, because they do it and that's another thing too, is if they bring a false charge, we should sue them.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying is the punishment for improper conduct of government employees should be more severe because we hold them to a higher standard of public service and conduct.
And the thing is, they always say that they are held to a higher standard, but they're not even held to
any
normal
standard.
standards, to the very
Fact.
normal standard like we are. So
No.
I mean, whenever
and I'm going to tell you,
I think it's just, I mean, it's a joke whenever they say, "Oh, we are held to a higher standard." Oh, shit.
If that was true, we would never have developed the automobile because everybody would be DEI. All right. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I think you did a good job. Make sure it's a legitimate traffic stop. Number one. Number two.
legitimate traffic stop, and the main thing after that is that they have to reasonably believe that you are not only armed but armed and dangerous, and there is a legitimate safety
Concern.
concern.
There you go. Legitimate safety concern for the officer's well-being. And
Right.
absent that, no, you don't have to get out of the car. So they could have written this better, but they didn't. And one of the things they didn't do is that they did not argue, or the court didn't rule on the Fourth Amendment violation here. And they said, the last paragraph in here, I'm just going to read this and we're done. Pretty much done because we always come up with something. The touchstone, this is from the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania v. Mimms, and they again tie it to Terry versus Ohio. The touchstone of our analysis under the Fourth Amendment is always the reasonableness in all the circumstances of the particular governmental invasion of a citizen's personal security. There it is right there. The totality of the circumstances is always the reasonableness of the circumstances of the government invasion of the citizen's personal security. And it depends on the balance, like it says, the legitimacy of their requests. And it's not a lawful order if it is not founded in law.
Right.
But if they do that, they can say whatever you say, I believe you're armed and dangerous. That's why it's good to ask questions, because questions can be disarming.
Right, because you throw them off guard. They're not pulling you over for them to answer questions. So whenever you start asking questions, they don't know what to do. They're just like when you spotlight a deer, like what?
The deer in the headlights. Yeah, and realize this too, is they have a duty and an obligation to respond to your questions. Okay? And that's why I like the 10 questions. We might want to go over those.
All right.
Are you
We'll,
lawfully in my presence? Are you in official capacity right now? I've seen so many scenarios where peace officers who hold official capacity when they're employed and on duty think that they're employees when they're not, and that they have occupational protection. They don't. They're just a public and regular citizen.
like
So,
when they work up duty jobs in their city or municipal uniform.
matter of fact, they cannot do that. When they're not on duty, they're not even allowed to wear those uniforms.
And they do
And
it everywhere.
until you say something to their supervisors and threaten to sue them,
Yeah.
and that would
I know.
you'd go directly with a petition for a writ of mandamus. Just
I
say
know
they have been notified and blah blah blah.
I know that Laredo does it, and I know that DPS does it too. Whenever they're doing roadside work, like on the
No,
construction crews, they're not on duty.
if they're not on duty, they shouldn't have those uniforms on. If you look at their policies and procedures, it describes when they're allowed to wear that uniform. Uni meaning one form. Okay, they're allowed to wear that uniform, and that's it. They can't
Right.
wear it anywhere, because if they're wearing it outside that, then they're giving the presentment of official capacity, which is abuse of authority. They're not in their official capacity, don't hold any authority whatsoever. And
Right.
I've approached, over the years, I've had so many encounters where I just come up and ask them, "Oh, so who are you? Do you have a card?" Not right now. I said, "Well, are you in your official capacity right now?" No, this is my side job. Yeah, I said, "Well, I dig ditches for a side job, but I can't wear my three-piece suit and it says I'm going to court." I said, "So if you're not in official capacity, you need to take that off. Otherwise, I'll get a court order that says that you cannot wear that when you're in your private citizen capacity. Go put on your gym shorts and your gym shirt and your tennis shoes." Because we did not employ these people to act outside that. That's why everything is covered by statute. When they're in official capacity, these are the things that they can do. And when they're in official capacity, they have the right to lawfully wear a peace officer's uniform.
Right.
Otherwise, they don't, and their policy should enforce that. Otherwise, it's an abuse of power, or something like that. I may be quoting that improperly, but it's just they're not in their official capacity, so they're impersonating a public official. That's what it is. They're impersonating a public official.
Right.
Take that, bitches. Take that.
All right.
Anyway,
Well, we've been live for an hour. I think
we'll call it.
we'll call it a
Bam.
night, and we'll go over some other cases in the following podcast.
Other
And I
situations.
think,
Oh, yeah. And if anybody has a question or a situation they would like us to deal with and help dissect for you, we can help do that and give you a pro se's perspective and where we believe your strengths and authorities are.
yeah, for sure. You have an email, or you want me to give them my email?
Uh, I'm having eels swimming by. Yeah, just go ahead and give them the Corners News email.
All right. So if you have a question or a case you want for us to look at or cover, my email is corners.news1@gmail.com. Corners.news1@gmail.com. Let me post it
Yeah, and
there.
when I remember Gladys and Shields' email, I'll throw that out there next time too.
Yeah,
All right.
gladius@shield.com.
I think it's Gladys and Shield at gmail.com. And the
Oh,
website is
the email.
gladysandShield.com. Yeah. Email, I think, is gladysandShield at gmail.com. But don't hold me to that. I'll confirm that next week. But
Got it.
anyway, I hope we help you guys a little bit. We just want you to be able to have understanding and be able to know that you have more power in your little pinky than the entire United States government. So stand up, make America strong, and pray for Charlie Kirk's family. That was absolutely a heartbreak and a absolute travesty what happened yesterday.
It was.
So anyway, God bless you all. Stay safe, take care of one another, and keep America free.
Catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Good night.